Your actions saved many lives today. You're a much wiser man than I, Qui-Gon Jinn.
Thanks to your teachings.
While Andor is excellent cinema, storytelling, world building, and can stand on its own and drive in new audiences by the boatload, the Tales of the Jedi feel like something completely different. It almost feels like a warm blanket over the soul, like comfort food but in video form for us prequel fans. It's designed to reward us for decades of loyalty to the franchise. In the second episode of TOTJ, my eyes grew watery as I watched Dooku take a stand in front of those poor villagers suffering beneath the gilded heel of that corrupt senator. While for some, watching Dooku act like a hero and save the innocent from certain death might be shocking, for me, it was not. That's because I've read stories like Dooku, Jedi Lost, which detailed this extraordinary Jedi's childhood in earlier years. As a young man, Dooku was once a decent and courageous man. He was bright-eyed and even had some doubts about his own abilities. But it's one thing to read about how Dooku once was, and it's a completely different thing to see it actually unfold on screen. There are some emotions that can only be brought out when the perfect music and image are aligned together on screen. And that's when the condensation, the manly condensation, began to appear in my peripherals. There are 3 episodes that cover Dooku in the Tales of the Jedi series, which I highly recommend if you are in fact a fan of the prequel era. And they all really help broaden our understanding of Count Dooku, the main villain in Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. He's the man who famously delivered these lines to a trapped Obi-Wan Kenobi on Geonosis.
Qui-Gon always spoke very highly of you.
I wish he were still alive. I could use his help right now.
What we as audiences thought was just a bold-faced lie more than 20 years ago was actually mostly true.
You need not worry, Master. Obi-Wan fills that role now. He acquits himself quite well.
You're always singing his praises.
We now know that Count Dooku had already fallen to the dark side when Qui-Gon Jinn died.
He was fascinated with this tree, having been born here on Coruscant, a planet of steel and stone. He knew nothing like it.
He clearly is mourning the loss of his apprentice. Falling to the dark side is not always immediate. It's not like flipping a switch. It can be very gradual. One does not just simply teach younglings in the morning lightsaber techniques and then slaughter them with a lightsaber later that night. Not everyone, at least.
You've gone too far. You allowed Maul to kill him.
These moments really paint a different picture of who Dooku was. There was never enough time in the prequels to explain why he left the Jedi Order and what his motivations were. Even if you've read Master and Apprentice, you'll know how cold and aloof Dooku seemed to a young Qui-Gon Jinn. He was never really given a chance to explain himself. For him to show so much concern over the death of his apprentice challenges what we know about him. By episode 2, Dooku had already fallen quite deeply to the dark side, and just months from this scene, he would be waging one of the most destructive wars the galaxy had ever seen. He would use entire worlds of sentient beings as hostages in his political struggle. He would order the indiscriminate shelling and bombing of civilian targets only to create more fear and paralyze his enemies. How do we get there? Well, before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, ownersaper.com. It's sponsors like this that allow us to continue to do deeper dives and longer videos about the lore that we all love and appreciate, even when the algorithm seems to favor shorter content nowadays. Today we're going to be taking a look at their elite line of sabers, which includes some truly awesome designs ranging from the classic double saber hilt, perfect for practitioners of Jar Kai. We also have the Dunamis, a cross hilt design great for giving your hands that extra protection you're looking for when locking blades with another duelist. And of course, we also have the First Dawn, modeled after Obi-Wan Kenobi's first 2 lightsabers. We also have 2 promo codes for you guys today. If you purchase 2 lightsabers, then at checkout use the code OCT100F for $100 off of your purchase. Also, you can use the promo code PORG, P-O-R-G, for 20% off of any purchase. Check out the description down below for more information. And as usual, thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video. Before we led battle droids and besieged entire planets with separatist fleets, Count Dooku toured the lecture circuits, and he would speak in front of sold-out crowds in lecture halls, and one of his most famous speeches happened in 24 BBY. It was known as the Raxus Address. In the speech, he rallied the Outer Rim, and he denounced the Galactic Republic as a useless organization so burdened by corruption and bureaucracy that it could hardly support those in the core regions of the galaxy that it favored, let alone those who were truly in need of aid in the Outer Rim. I mean, this was an area that was historically underdeveloped, underserved, and let to rot in the face of famine, disease, piracy, and other terrors. It was an area of the galaxy that paid taxes and followed the Republic regulations when they could, despite receiving so little in return. But was Dooku just an opportunist, an outsider who seized on the anger of some marginalized group and then weaponized them into a political movement? Well, the best lies and deceits contain a huge amount of truth. It's easy to wow your audience with your words if you can draw from real emotions when you speak. All you need to do is slightly alter the context of what you're saying to get what you really want. And Count Dooku was a master at this. But in the case of the Raxus Address, Count Dooku did not need to twist his words. He didn't need to carefully set up his arguments. He just spoke from the heart and past experiences. When he was a younger man, he had witnessed firsthand what the Republic's membership gave to the people of the Outer Rim. Several decades earlier, Dooku arrived on an unknown Outer Rim planet with his then Padawan Qui-Gon Jinn. The two found a desolate land devoid of life and greenery. Very few people managed to survive here, and they all cowered from the sight of the approaching Jedi. Dooku had been assigned on a mission to recover the son of the local Senator Dagonaut, who was being held in this area by, I guess you could call him, separatists. The two Jedi quickly find out that every person living in this tiny village was complicit in this kidnapping. But instead of quickly reacting, Count Dooku waited.
Come. I will show you where the Senator's son is.
You're one of the kidnappers.
They all are.
Dooku kept his weapon in his hilt and attempted to get more information about the situation. Now, Dooku always had that same fire and zeal that Anakin Skywalker had. He also had that same unshakable sense of what was right and wrong. But he was always a more reserved and controlled individual. Perhaps it's the noble blood in his veins, but he never really spent that much time on Serena with that noble family that disowned him. Yet he still always carried himself in a very dignified way. And so this is how he avoids bloodshed, at least for now. When Dooku finds the son of the Senator, we're surprised to learn that he's sided with the villagers. This isn't just simple Stockholm Syndrome either.
How could my father allow this to happen to his people?
You don't blame them for abducting you.
What choice do they have?
If only senators were judged by the amount of poverty and suffering and lack of development in their districts rather than their public personas in front of the cameras, maybe more things would get done. Or at least that's something that Count Dooku or Anakin would say. When the senator finally arrives, there's a stark contrast between the colorful and ornate armor of the senator's guards and the villagers' own wretched rags. The senator's exuberant presence and existence is offensive to the eyes. He has no shame at how dilapidated his district looks. He has no shame over what are clearly the results of his failed policies. Instead, he orders his men to prepare to fire on his own constituents.
You serve the Senate.
No. We serve the people of this republic.
A servant of the people, a true populace. Can you see now why Count Dooku was so popular, especially in those early days when he was raising support for his Confederacy of Independent Systems? It was moments like this that Count Dooku would be remembered for in certain parts of the galaxy. They will certainly speak about this story when a foreigner, a strange Jedi, came from the core of the galaxy and helped these poor people in the Outer Rim and stood with them against the corrupt tyrants backed by the Republic. If there's any criticism for Dooku in this moment, any sign of the future Sith that he would become, it's the fact that he did not exhaust all options. He sort of just waited to the point where the senator would just open fire with his guards. That's always been a part of Count Dooku's personality, even when he was a younger Jedi. He wasn't the kind of individual who would instigate a fight, but he wouldn't grovel or beg other people to stop fighting. This was below him. He always had this pride, which would ultimately poison him. It wasn't just the Republic that Dooku had a problem with, it was also the Jedi Order, which brings me to this quote where he's talking to Darth Sidious. It comes from the Book of Sith. The Jedi Order's problem is Yoda. No being can wield that kind of power for centuries without being complacent at best or corrupt at worst. He has no idea it's overtaken him. He no longer sees all the little cumulative evils that the Republic tolerates and fosters, from slavery to endless wars. And he never asks, why are we not acting to stop this? Live alongside corruption for too long and you no longer notice the stench. The Jedi cannot help the slaves of Tatooine, but they can help the slave masters. It is so hard to believe that these words came from the same individual who protected those villagers, but also rained fire and destruction down onto Coruscant. Are we so surprised that Ki-Adi-Mundi and Mace Windu, two individuals who knew Count Dooku very well, came to Count Dooku's defense when Padme accused him of ordering assassination on her?
He is a political idealist, not a murderer.
You know, milady, Count Dooku was once a Jedi. He couldn't assassinate anyone. It's not in his character.
Perhaps it's not Dooku who changed so much. Perhaps it was just the world around him that changed. No, failed him. Content like this fills us with empathy, and even the most evil villains must be given the chance, not for redemption, but for understanding. Because if you can truly understand someone, understand their motivations, understand the events that shape their childhood, their adulthood, if you can come to a complete understanding of another person, you can only grow to pity or love who they have become. And you can take that knowledge and enrich your own life as well.